The year is 1509. Inside the royal palace of England, a young queen wakes to the dim flicker of candlelight and the low murmur of voices. As her vision adjusts, she sees the familiar shapes of men gathered around her bed, physicians in dark robes holding parchment and quills. Their eyes avoid hers. Their expressions are clinical, detached. She knows why they've come again. They aren't there to comfort her or ease her pain. They've come to examine her, to inspect the private aftermath of her husband's visit, to determine by touch and by question whether she might finally be pregnant. This isn't care, it's surveillance, sanctioned, systematic, and cold. And for Catherine of Aragon, 23 years old and newly crowned Queen of England, this will become her life for the next 24 years. Her body, a battleground. Her womb, a national obsession. Catherine's marriage to King Henry VIII wasn't built on love, though there was affection once. It was a political alliance. Spain and England bound together through her womb. She was the daughter of Ferdinand and Isabella, conquerors of empires and guardians of Christendom, sent across the sea to secure peace between kingdoms that had spent centuries at war. Her body, from the beginning, was a treaty. But peace, as history loves to remind us, is fragile when it depends on bloodlines. And when a queen failed to bear sons, her failure wasn't private, it was treasonous. Catherine's duty was not to rule, not to advise, not to love. It was to produce a male heir who would ensure England's future and justify her crown. When her first pregnancies ended in tragedy, stillbirths, miscarriages, infants who lived only for moments, the physicians did not offer sympathy. They studied her as a problem to be solved. They took notes, made predictions, adjusted theories, and the palace, once filled with music and feasting, became a silent laboratory devoted to the pursuit of one goal, a son. After a third failed pregnancy in 1513, the royal doctors began what they called assistance protocols. They were working with the best knowledge medieval science could offer, a mixture of astrology, superstitions, and flawed anatomy disguised as divine wisdom. They believed that for conception to succeed, the queen's body needed perfect harmony of humors. The planets must align favorably, and most bizarrely, that the woman must experience pleasure during intercourse. They were certain that without ecstasy, conception was impossible, so they set out to create it. In their journals, still preserved in the British Library, Henry's physicians described administering mixtures of Spanish fly, mandrake root, and powdered ambergris. These concoctions were given to Catherine before her scheduled nights with the king. The queen's body was dosed, observed, and recorded like an experiment. When those attempts failed, the doctors proposed something darker, the use of conception facilitators. Their logic was obscene, but sincere. If the queen's desire could not be stirred by her husband alone, then perhaps the presence or touch of other vigorous men might stimulate her humors and prepare her for conception. They believed that a woman's fertility could be influenced by the vitality of nearby men, even without full intercourse. Spanish ambassador reports from 1515 speak of assistants of great vigor being summoned to the English court. Papal letters from Rome mention special permissions granted for unconventional remedies in matters of royal succession. Even Henry himself years later would allude to unnatural measures attempted in hope of heirs. But the most disturbing insight comes from Catherine's own letters to her sister, Maria of Aragon. Written in cipher and later decoded, they describe her humiliation in detail. They make of me an instrument, not a wife. They say it is for the good of England, yet I am treated as less than human. She speaks of being forced to ingest strange tonics, to endure inspections, to perform rituals dictated by doctors who assured her that pleasure and faith must combine for God to bless her womb. Then there is the testimony of Dr. Fernando Lopez, Catherine's Spanish physician. After returning home in 1518,
He confessed before the church that during his service to the English crown, he had witnessed a systematic program of RICE. In his statement, he described 14 men chosen by physicians, approved by clergy, whose role was to assist the Queen's preparation for RICE. Whether Lopez meant actual intercourse or something more indirect is uncertain, but historians agree on what matters. Catherine endured invasive, repeated procedures involving multiple men under medical supervision. These were not acts of passion, but of protocol. They were sanctioned by the church, justified by medicine, and driven by desperation. Between 1510 and 1518, Catherine conceived 6 times. 5 children were born dead or died within weeks. Only one survived, Princess Mary, the future Queen of England. No prince, no heir, no stability. And so the experiments escalated. The physicians began calling her womb stubborn, as though it were a mechanical fault to be fixed. The royal treasurer's accounts show endless purchases of substances meant to warm and sweeten the body: musk, crushed pearls, ground gemstones, and even powdered horn. Catherine was made to drink these mixtures, to bathe in them, to have them rubbed into her skin. When those failed, the physicians resorted to fumigation, burning herbs beneath her body, claiming the smoke would open the womb. They inserted medicinal pessaries, bled her according to the moon, and induced fevers they believed would cleanse her humors. Italian and French specialists were summoned, each bringing new theories, each treating her body like a battlefield of failed science. To the court, this was duty. To Catherine, it was torment. Her surviving letters are raw with grief. She wrote of being watched, touched, and discussed by strangers. Her pain turned into data for men who saw her not as a queen, but as a vessel that refused to obey. "They treat me," she wrote, "as one treats land that will not yield, no matter how it is tilled." As the years passed, her health broke down. Her faith wavered. Priests told her to pray harder. Doctors told her to try again, but her body was tired. By her early 40s, the bleeding stopped. The physicians fell silent. The king's patience ran out. When it became clear that no son would come, Henry turned to Rome. He petitioned the Pope to annul their marriage, claiming it had been cursed from the beginning because Catherine had once been married to his brother Arthur. The years of invasive procedures, the endless medical violations, the 14 men, it all vanished from the record. A new story was written, that Catherine was barren by God's will, not by man's cruelty. Acknowledging the truth would have meant admitting that the church and the medical establishment had sanctioned acts that violated their own moral codes, so the documents were sealed. Her suffering became a footnote, summarized in the royal annals by one crudely simple line: the marriage produced no male issue. Catherine died in 1536 at the age of 50, likely from cancer, though some historians believe the endless consumption of toxins and potions contributed to her decline. She had spent nearly half her life as a patient in her own marriage. Even in death, she was denied peace. Her husband had already moved on to Anne Boleyn, who would endure her own fertility nightmare before being executed for adultery when she too failed to produce sons. Across Europe, other queens suffered similar fates: Isabella of Castile, Margaret of Anjou, and Anne of Austria. Each subjected to medical programs designed to force conception, each told it was her divine duty, each treated as a machine for inheritance. The pattern was relentless and universal. When a woman's fertility faltered, her body became public property. Catherine's tragedy was not an anomaly. It was the system, a system built on faith, law, and medicine, where each believed the others justified their cruelty. The horror lay not in secret perversion, but in bureaucratic normality. Every act was recorded, approved, and rationalized. Those records still exist: the physicians' journals, the papal dispensations, the royal expense ledgers. They describe the same events in calm, sterile language, turning agony into observation, faith into formula. Applied tonic to the queen's thighs. Observation, body temperature favorable. Recommended continued preparation. The words are chilling not because of what they describe, but because of how casually they describe it. 500 years later, Those papers remain, ink on parchment, neatly cataloged in archives across Europe. They don't read like confessions. They read like success reports. The doctors didn't hide what they did because they didn't think it was wrong. To them, this was medicine. It was loyalty. It was service to the crown. That's what makes Catherine's story truly terrifying. Her violation wasn't the result of madness or malice. It was the product of reason, the union of science and religion in pursuit of a goal that erased the humanity of the woman it targeted.